The woman standing in the dusty yard of the Mojave, California trading post had forgotten what it felt like to take up space in the world. Her shoulders hunched inward, as though trying to make herself disappear entirely while men shouted prices for furs and leather goods around her. Rebecca Owens had traveled 3 weeks by wagon train from St. Louis, arriving in this sun-scorched corner of California in the late summer of 1867, with nothing but a battered trunk and the clothes on her back. Her aunt had died 2 months into the journey, leaving Rebecca alone at 22 years old in a world that had never once suggested she had value beyond being quiet and unobtrusive. The wagon master had deposited her here with barely a word, and now she stood paralyzed, uncertain where to go or what to do next. The heat pressed down like a physical weight, and Rebecca's dark hair clung to her neck beneath her bonnet. She had perhaps $3 to her name, no family, no prospects, and a lifetime of being told through silence and indifference that she simply did not matter enough for anyone to care whether she lived or disappeared. A commotion near the hitching post caught her attention. A massive man was dismounting from an equally massive horse, his movements economical despite his size. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders so broad they blocked out the sun, and arms that strained against his buckskin shirt with pure muscle. His hair fell past his collar in dark waves, and a thick beard covered the lower half of his face. He moved with the confidence of someone who had spent years in wild places, his boots hitting the packed earth with purpose. Rebecca quickly looked away, trained by years of being invisible to never draw attention. She picked up her trunk, struggling with its weight, and tried to move toward the shade of the trading post's awning. "Let me get that." The voice came from directly beside her, deep and rough like rocks tumbling in a river. Rebecca startled, nearly dropping the trunk entirely. The mountain man had crossed the distance without her noticing, and now he simply took the trunk from her hands before she could protest. It looked like nothing in his grip. "Where are you headed?" he asked, his eyes a startling blue against his sun-darkened skin. Rebecca opened her mouth, then closed it. She had no answer, no destination, no plan. "I don't know," she finally whispered, the admission feeling like failure. The man studied her for a long moment, and Rebecca waited for him to walk away, to dismiss her as everyone else had done. Instead, he shifted the trunk to one hand as though it weighed nothing and gestured toward the trading post. "Name is Everett Easton," he said. "You look like you could use some water and a place to sit down. Come on." It was not a request or a demand, just a simple statement of fact, and Rebecca found herself following him into the relative coolness of the trading post. He set her trunk down carefully and spoke to the proprietor, a weathered man named Hughes who eyed Rebecca with the calculation of someone assessing whether she represented profit or problem. Everett returned with a cup of water and pressed it into her hands. "Drink," he said. "When did you last eat?" "Yesterday morning," Rebecca admitted, the water cool and precious on her tongue. Without another word, Everett went back to the counter and returned with bread, cheese, and dried meat. He set it down in front of her, and then lowered himself into a chair that creaked under his weight, watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "You come in on that wagon train?" he asked. Rebecca nodded, taking a small bite of bread. It tasted like heaven. "You got family here?" "Someone expecting you." She shook her head, shame burning in her chest. What kind of person arrived in a place like this alone, unwanted, with nowhere to go? Everett was quiet for a moment, his big hands resting on his knees. "You got a name?" "Rebecca Owens," she said softly. "Well, Rebecca Owens, I have a proposition for you." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I live up in the mountains about a day's ride from here. I have a cabin, land, and more work than I can handle alone. I could use help with cooking, mending, preserving food for winter. You would have your own room, proper wages, and I give you my word I am a decent man who would not harm you." Rebecca stared at him, certain she had misheard. "You are offering me work." "I am offering you a place," Everett corrected. "Work is part of it, but mostly I am offering you somewhere safe to be." She did not know what to say. This man did not know her, had no reason to help her, and yet here he sat offering her exactly what she needed most. Suspicion warred with desperate hope. "Why?" The word came out barely above a whisper. Everett looked at her with those clear blue eyes, and his expression softened. "Because you look like you need help, and I happen to be in a position to offer it. Nothing more complicated than that." Rebecca's hands trembled around the cup. "I have no references, no skills beyond basic household work. I cannot promise I would be useful to you." "Can you cook?" "Yes." "Can you mend clothes?" "Yes." "Can you follow basic instructions and not burn my cabin down?" Despite everything, Rebecca felt the corner of her mouth twitch. "I believe so." Everett nodded decisively. "Then we have an understanding. I am heading back up to my cabin tomorrow morning. You can come with me if you choose. If you do not like it after a week, I will bring you back to town, no questions asked. Fair." It was more than fair. It was a lifeline thrown to someone drowning. "Thank you," Rebecca said, and the words felt inadequate for the enormity of what he offered. "No thanks necessary," Everett replied, rising from his chair. "I need to finish my business here in town. There is a boarding house 2 buildings down where you can get a room for the night. Tell Mrs. Patterson that Everett sent you and to put it on my account." He picked up her trunk again before she could protest and walked out into the blazing afternoon, leaving Rebecca sitting alone with half-eaten food and the first spark of something that might have been hope flickering in her chest. The boarding house was clean and spare, and Mrs. Patterson was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who asked no prying questions. Rebecca slept that night in an actual bed for the first time in weeks, though her mind spun with uncertainty about what morning would bring. True to his word, Everett appeared just after dawn, leading 2 horses. One was the big bay gelding he had ridden yesterday, and the other was a smaller mare with kind eyes. He secured Rebecca's trunk to the bay and then helped her mount the mare with hands that were gentle despite their size and calluses. "Her name is Rosie," Everett said. "She has got a sweet temperament and will not give you trouble." Rebecca settled into the saddle, acutely aware that she had never ridden alone before. The few times she had been on horseback, she had ridden behind someone else, holding on for dear life. Everett seemed to sense her nervousness. "We will take it slow. Just keep the reins loose and let her follow Jasper here." He patted his gelding's neck. "She knows the way home." They left Mojave as the sun climbed higher, heading north into terrain that grew increasingly rugged. The desert gave way to scrub, then to scattered pines, then to thick forest. The temperature dropped as they gained elevation, and Rebecca found herself breathing easier in the cooler air. Everett rode ahead but looked back frequently to check on her. He did not push the pace, stopping twice to let the horses drink and rest. During the second stop, he passed her a canteen and more of the dried meat. "How long have you lived in the mountains?" Rebecca asked, surprising herself with the question. Everett leaned against a boulder, arms crossed over his broad chest. 5 years. Came out here after the war ended. Needed somewhere quiet." Rebecca understood about needing quiet. She had spent most of her life trying to be quiet, to not take up space, to not be a burden. But the quiet Everett spoke of seemed different, chosen rather than imposed. "You ever get lonely?" The question escaped before she could stop it, and she immediately wished she could take it back, but Everett just considered it seriously. "Sometimes. But I prefer my own company to bad company, and those seemed like the two choices for a long time. Maybe that is changing now. He said it casually, but there was weight to the words that made Rebecca's chest feel tight. They continued climbing, and as afternoon stretched toward evening, the forest opened up into a meadow. On the far side sat a cabin that looked solid and well-built, with a stone chimney rising from one end and a covered porch running along the front. Behind it stood a small barn, a chicken coop, and what looked like a smokehouse. A creek ran along the edge of the clearing, the sound of water over rocks providing a constant gentle music. "Home," Everett said simply. Rebecca stared at the scene before her. It was beautiful in a way that made her throat ache. Remote and peaceful, surrounded by mountains that stretched up to touch the sky. The kind of place she had never imagined existed, much less that she might live in. Everett dismounted and came to help her down from Rosie. His hands circled her waist easily, lifting her as though she weighed nothing and setting her gently on the ground. Rebecca was not a small woman, but next to Everett she felt delicate, protected in a way she had never experienced. "Come on," he said. "I will show you around before the light goes." The cabin's interior was larger than it had appeared from outside, with a main room that served as kitchen and living area, 2 bedrooms off to one side, and a loft above accessed by a sturdy ladder. Everything was clean and organized, though clearly the space had been occupied by a man living alone. The furniture was handmade but well crafted, and a large stone fireplace dominated one wall. "This room here is yours," Everett said, opening the door to the smaller of the 2 bedrooms. It held a bed with a real mattress, a small dresser, and a window that looked out over the meadow. "I will bring your trunk in shortly." "It is more than I expected," Rebecca said honestly. "More than I deserve." Everett turned to look at her, his expression serious. "You deserve a safe place to sleep and food in your belly, Rebecca Owens. Anyone who told you different was lying." The words hit her like a physical blow, not because they were harsh but because they were kind. Because they suggested she had value simply by existing, which ran counter to everything she had internalized over 22 years. She could not find words to respond, so she just nodded, looking down at her hands. Over the next few days, Rebecca learned the rhythms of life in Everett's cabin. He woke before dawn and started the fire, then went out to tend the horses and check his trap lines. When he returned, she would have breakfast ready, coffee hot and strong the way he liked it. He never sat down to eat without thanking her for the meal, treating her cooking with respect even when it was just simple fare. The work was constant, but not overwhelming. She mended his clothes, discovering that he was rough on fabric and needed new patches on his shirts weekly. She organized the cabin's stores, preserved vegetables from his small garden, and learned to render fat for candles and soap. Everett was patient with her questions, showing her how things worked and never making her feel stupid for not knowing. What surprised her most was how he spoke to her. Not at her, not around her, but to her, as though her thoughts and opinions mattered. He asked what she wanted for dinner, whether she preferred the cabin warmer or cooler, if she needed anything from town. Small questions, perhaps, but they represented something she had never had before: agency. On the 5th morning, Rebecca woke to find Everett already at the kitchen table, coffee poured. When she emerged from her room, he looked up and said, "Good morning. You matter to me, Rebecca. I want you to know that." She stopped mid-step, certain she had misheard. "What?" "You matter," he repeated calmly, as though he had just commented on the weather. "Figured you should know." Then he went back to his coffee, leaving Rebecca standing frozen, her mind unable to process what had just happened. The next morning, the same thing. "Morning, Rebecca, you matter to me." And the next. And the next. At first, she did not know how to respond. She would mumble something incoherent and busy herself with breakfast, her cheeks burning. But Everett never seemed to expect a response. He just said it, simple and matter-of-fact, and then continued with his day. After a week, curiosity overcame her discomfort. "Why do you keep saying that?" she asked one morning, turning from the stove to face him. Everett looked at her steadily. "Because I suspect nobody ever has, and I figure you need to hear it until you believe it. But you barely know me." "I know enough. I know you work hard without complaint. I know you are kind to the animals. I know you have not once treated me like I am something to be afraid of, even though I am twice your size and we are alone out here." He paused. "I know that when you think I am not looking, you get this expression on your face like you are waiting for the world to punish you for existing. And that tells me somebody failed you badly. Rebecca Owens." Tears pricked at her eyes. She turned back to the stove quickly, not wanting him to see. "Hey," his voice was gentle, "it is all right to cry, nothing wrong with it." "I do not want to be weak," she whispered. "Crying is not weakness, it is just your heart trying to speak when words are not enough." He was quiet for a moment. "You matter to me, Rebecca. That is not going to change because you shed some tears." She did cry then, quietly, while she finished cooking the eggs. And Everett sat at his table, drinking his coffee and giving her the space to feel what she needed to feel without making her explain or apologize for it. As summer faded toward autumn, Rebecca began to change in ways she could not quite articulate. The constant fear that had lived in her chest for as long as she could remember began to ease, replaced by something tentative and fragile but real. She started to sleep better, to eat without the nagging voice in her head telling her she did not deserve the food. She found herself humming while she worked, and once she even laughed at something Everett said, the sound startling them both. Everett himself remained constant. Every morning, those same words, "You matter to me, Rebecca." Every evening, genuine interest in how her day had been. He brought her small gifts from his excursions into the forest, interesting rocks, feathers, once a piece of crystal he had found in a stream. He never treated these offerings as though they were significant, just set them down near her with a casual thought, "You might like this." But Rebecca treasured each one. She began to notice other things about him too. The way his hands, so large and capable, could be incredibly gentle when handling injured animals or tending his garden. The deep rumble of his laugh, rare but genuine. The way he looked at the mountains in the early morning light, something almost reverent in his expression. The scars on his forearms and the one that cut through his left eyebrow, evidence of a hard life that he never spoke about unless directly asked. One evening in late September, Everett came back from checking his traps with a torn shirt and blood on his arm. Rebecca gasped when she saw him. "It is nothing," he said quickly. "Just got careless around a snare. Animal I was not expecting got the jump on me." "Sit down," Rebecca ordered, surprising herself with the authority in her voice. She fetched water and clean cloth, her hands steady as she cleaned the wound. It was not deep, but it was long, running from his elbow to his wrist. "You are good at this," Everett observed, watching her work. "My aunt was sickly. I learned to tend wounds and illness." Rebecca focused on wrapping the bandage properly. "You should be more careful. These mountains need you in one piece." "Do they?" Something in his voice made her look up. He was watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Yes," she said softly. "They do, and so do I." The confession hung in the air between them. Everett's good hand came up to cover hers where it rested on his forearm. "Rebecca," he said, and her name in his deep voice felt like a caress. "I need to tell you something." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "All right." "When I brought you up here, I told myself it was just to help someone in need, that I was doing a good deed and nothing more." His thumb moved gently across her knuckles. But that was only partly true. The whole truth is that when I saw you standing in that trading post yard, looking lost and alone, something in my chest just knew. I cannot explain it better than that. I just knew you were supposed to be here, with me. Rebecca could barely breathe. Everett. You do not have to say anything, he continued. I am not asking you for anything. I just need you to understand that when I tell you that you matter to me, I mean it in every way a man can mean such a thing. You matter to me because you are you. Because you have brought life into this cabin that I did not even know was missing. Because when I come home and see you here, everything feels right in a way it never has before. I am afraid, Rebecca admitted, her voice barely a whisper. Of me. No, of believing this is real. Of believing I deserve this. You, she swallowed hard. All my life, I have been the person nobody noticed, the one who did not matter enough to remember. And you are asking me to believe that I suddenly do matter, that I have worth, and it feels like if I let myself believe it and then it is taken away, I will not survive it. Everett stood, and even though Rebecca was standing too, he towered over her. But instead of feeling intimidated, she felt sheltered. His uninjured hand came up to cup her cheek with infinite gentleness. I cannot promise that nothing bad will ever happen, he said. Life does not work that way, but I can promise you this. As long as I draw breath, you will matter to me. You will be seen, valued, and treasured, not because of what you do for me, but because of who you are. And I will spend every day proving that to you until you believe it in your bones. A tear slipped down Rebecca's cheek. I want to believe it. Then that is enough for now. We will work on the rest together. He smiled, and it transformed his entire face. You matter to me, Rebecca Owens. Every morning I will tell you, and one day you will finally know it is true. She surprised them both by stepping forward into his embrace. Everett's arms came around her immediately, careful of his injured arm, and Rebecca pressed her face against his chest. He was solid and warm and real, and for the first time in her life, she felt like she had come home. They stood like that for a long time, the fire crackling in the hearth and the darkness gathering outside. When they finally pulled apart, something fundamental had shifted between them. The air felt charged with possibility, with the promise of something building between them that neither of them wanted to rush but both acknowledged was there. That night, Rebecca lay in her bed and let herself imagine a future here. Not just as Everett's employee or housekeeper, but as something more. The thought terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. The next morning, Everett said his usual greeting, "Morning, Rebecca. You matter to me." But this time, Rebecca looked him in the eye and said, "Good morning, Everett. You matter to me too." His smile could have lit the whole cabin. October brought the first real cold, and with it, an increased urgency to prepare for winter. Everett spent long days hunting and preserving meat, while Rebecca worked on storing vegetables, making preserves, and ensuring they had sufficient supplies to last through months of snow. They worked in tandem, developing an easy rhythm that felt natural and right. One afternoon, Everett returned from a hunting trip with a massive elk. Rebecca helped him butcher it, not squeamish about the work despite her sheltered upbringing. As they worked side by side, their hands occasionally brushing, Rebecca felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the physical labor. "You are good at this," Everett observed, echoing his words from weeks earlier. "You are stronger than you give yourself credit for." "I am learning," Rebecca said. "You make me want to be strong." Everett paused in his work, his knife stilling. "You already are strong, Rebecca. You survived things that would have broken other people. You traveled across the country alone. You took a chance on a stranger in the wilderness. That takes courage most people do not have. I did not feel courageous. I felt desperate. Sometimes they are the same thing. He resumed cutting, his movements efficient and practiced. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is moving forward despite the fear. You do that every day. Rebecca considered this as she worked. It had never occurred to her that simply surviving might require bravery. She had always thought of herself as weak, as someone who merely endured rather than truly lived. But maybe Everett was right. Maybe there was strength in still being here, still trying, still opening herself to the possibility of something better. That evening, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Everett surprised her by pulling out a harmonica. The music that emerged was haunting and beautiful, a melody that spoke of loneliness and longing and hope. Rebecca sat perfectly still, not wanting to break the spell. When he finished, she said, "That was beautiful. Where did you learn to play?" "My father taught me. Before the war." His expression grew distant. "Seems like a different lifetime now. Do you miss him?" "Every day. He was a good man, would have liked you." The casual certainty with which he said it made Rebecca's chest ache in the best way. "Tell me about him." So Everett did, and as the fire burned low and the night deepened around them, he shared stories of his childhood in Tennessee, of his father's blacksmith shop, of his mother's garden and his sister's laughter. It was the most he had ever spoken about his past, and Rebecca felt honored that he trusted her with these pieces of himself. "What happened to them?" she asked gently when he paused. "Fever took my mother and younger sister in 1860. My older sister married and moved to Virginia. My father died during the war when the shop was shelled. I was already enlisted by then." His jaw tightened. "I came home to nothing. No family, no shop, no reason to stay, so I did not." Rebecca reached out and took his hand. It engulfed hers completely, but she held on tight. "I am sorry you lost them. I am sorry you did not have anyone who treated you the way you deserved," Everett replied. "Tell me about your family," so Rebecca did, though her stories were darker. Parents who had died when she was young, leaving her to be raised by an aunt who viewed her as an obligation rather than a blessing. Years of being told to be quiet, to stay out of the way, to not ask for anything. The slow, crushing weight of invisibility. "She never hit me," Rebecca said carefully. "She fed me and clothed me. By most standards, she did her duty. But she never looked at me like she saw me, you know. I was just this thing she had to house until I could be someone else's responsibility." "That is its own kind of cruelty," Everett said, his voice rough with anger on her behalf. "Children need more than food and shelter. They need to be loved, to be told they have worth. I do not think she knew how. Her own childhood was hard." Rebecca was quiet for a moment. "I used to wonder what was wrong with me, why I was so easy not to love." Everett turned to face her fully, his blue eyes fierce. "Nothing is wrong with you, Rebecca. The failing was never yours, do you hear me? You are easy to love, so damned easy." The intensity of his words, the rawness in his voice, took her breath away. "Everett, I know we have not known each other long by conventional standards," he continued, "but I have lived enough years and seen enough people to know something true when I find it. And what I feel for you is true, Rebecca. It is real and it is deep and it gets stronger every single day." Rebecca's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "I feel it too. I am just so afraid I will ruin it somehow, that I will not know how to do this right." "There is no right way except honest." Everett cupped her face in both his hands now, the bandage on his arm almost healed. "We just figure it out together one day at a time. We make mistakes and we forgive them. We talk when things are hard. We show up for each other. That is all love is, Rebecca. Showing up every day and choosing each other. You make it sound simple. The feeling is simple. The doing takes work, but I am willing to do the work if you are." Rebecca felt something inside her crack open, all the walls she had built over years of protecting herself from disappointment crumbling in the face of Everett's steady, unwavering affection. "I want to try," she whispered. "I want to be brave enough to try." "You already are," Everett said, and then he kissed her. It was gentle and sweet, his lips soft despite the beard, his hands cradling her face like she was something precious and fragile. Rebecca melted into it, her own hands coming up to grip his shirt, anchoring herself to him. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Everett rested his forehead against hers. "You matter to me," he said, and it sounded like a vow. "You will always matter to me." "You matter to me too," Rebecca replied, and felt the truth of it resonate through her entire being. They sat together by the fire until the logs burned down to embers, wrapped in each other's arms, talking and kissing and making quiet promises about the future. When Rebecca finally went to her bed that night, she felt like a different person than the lost, invisible woman who had stood in the Mojave trading post just months before. November arrived with the first snow, and the mountains transformed into a wonderland of white and green. Rebecca had never seen anything so beautiful. She stood on the porch, wrapped in a blanket Everett had draped around her shoulders, watching the flakes fall. "What do you think?" Everett asked from behind her, his voice warm with amusement. "I think I never want to leave," Rebecca said honestly. "Good." He wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her back against his chest. "Because I never want you to." They had fallen into a new rhythm since that night by the fire. More touches, casual and affectionate, kisses good night and good morning. Everett still slept in his room and Rebecca in hers, but there was an understanding between them now, a commitment that felt more real than any legal document. One evening in late November, as they prepared dinner together, Rebecca asked, "Everett, do you ever think about getting married?" His hands stilled in the middle of chopping vegetables. "I do now," he said carefully. "Do you?" Rebecca's cheeks heated. "I have been thinking about it, about what it would mean, about whether." She trailed off, unsure how to continue. Everett set down his knife and turned to face her. "Rebecca Owens, are you asking me to marry you?" "No, maybe, I do not know." She covered her face with her hands. "I am making a mess of this." He gently pulled her hands away, his expression soft. "You could never make a mess of anything with me, but I need you to know something. When we marry, and I say when, not if, because I fully intend to spend the rest of my life with you, I need you to be sure. Not because you think it is expected, or because you are grateful, or because you feel obligated, but because you want to bind your life to mine because you love me." "I do love you," Rebecca said, the words emerging with surprising ease. "I think I have loved you since you picked up my trunk that first day without being asked. But I also know I am still learning to believe I deserve to be loved back. And I do not want you to marry someone who is only half certain of her own worth." Everett pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Then we wait until you are fully certain. I am not going anywhere, Rebecca. Take all the time you need. What if it takes years? Then I will tell you that you matter to me every morning for years until you believe it." He smiled against her hair. "I am a patient man." But Rebecca found that she did not want to wait years. Every day with Everett showed her what love was supposed to look like. He was protective without being controlling, strong without being cruel, confident without being arrogant. He listened when she spoke, valued her opinions, and treated her like an equal partner in running their household. He made her laugh, held her when she cried, and never once made her feel small or insignificant. More than that, he saw her. Really saw her. Not as a burden or an obligation or a convenience, but as a whole person with thoughts and feelings and worth. And slowly, gradually, Rebecca began to see herself through his eyes. December brought heavier snows, and they were effectively isolated from the rest of the world. But inside the cabin they had everything they needed: food, warmth, and each other. Rebecca taught Everett to make the pastries her mother had taught her before she died, and he taught her to carve wood, guiding her hands with his larger ones until she could make simple shapes. On Christmas morning, Rebecca woke to find a gift wrapped in cloth on the kitchen table. Inside was a beautiful wooden box that Everett had clearly made himself, inlaid with different types of wood in an intricate pattern. "For your treasures," he said, watching her face. "The rocks and feathers and things I have given you, they deserve a proper place." Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes. "It is beautiful, but I did not make you anything. You give me gifts every day," Everett interrupted. "Your smile, your laughter, your presence. You think I need more than that." She kissed him then, pouring all her gratitude and love into it. When they broke apart, Everett looked dazed and happy. "Marry me," Rebecca said suddenly. "I know what I said before, but Everett, I am sure. I am completely sure. You have shown me every single day that I matter, that I have worth, that I am loved. And I believe it now. I finally believe it. So marry me, please, because I cannot imagine spending another day of my life without knowing I am yours and you are mine." Everett's face split into the biggest smile she had ever seen. "Yes, hell yes." He picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing. When he set her down, his expression turned serious. "But Rebecca, I need to know you understand what you are signing up for. Life up here is hard. The winters are long and isolated. We will have to work constantly just to survive. I do not have much to offer beyond this cabin and my hands and my heart." "That is everything I need," Rebecca said firmly. "I do not want easy or comfortable or safe. I want real. I want you. I want this life we are building together. That is worth more than any amount of money or comfort." "You matter to me," Everett said, his voice thick with emotion. "You will always matter to me, Rebecca. For the rest of our lives, I will make sure you know that." "I know it now," Rebecca replied, and realized it was true. She finally fully believed it. "And you matter to me too, Everett Easton. You always will." They married in January, making the journey down to Mojave despite the snow. The ceremony was simple, performed by a circuit preacher with Mrs. Patterson and Hughes from the trading post as witnesses. Rebecca wore a simple blue dress that Mrs. Patterson helped her alter, and Everett wore clean buckskins and a shirt without patches. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Everett kissed Rebecca with such tenderness that Mrs. Patterson dabbed at her eyes with her handkerchief. They spent one night at the boarding house, christening their marriage properly, and Rebecca discovered that Everett was as gentle and attentive in the bedroom as he was everywhere else, making her feel cherished and desired in ways she had never imagined possible. The return trip to the cabin felt different, though nothing had materially changed. They were still the same two people riding the same trail to the same home, but Rebecca felt the difference in her bones. She was a wife now. She belonged to someone, and someone belonged to her. She mattered to Everett legally and spiritually, and in every way a person could matter to another. Life settled into a new normal as winter deepened. They shared a bed now, Rebecca curled against Everett's broad chest while snow piled up outside their windows. He still said it every morning, "You matter to me," and she had started saying it back, a ritual that grounded them both. February brought the worst of the winter storms, and they were trapped inside for days at a time. But Rebecca did not mind. She had her husband, her home, and a sense of peace she had never known before. They played cards and read by firelight and made love while the wind howled outside, creating their own warmth against the cold. One night during a particularly fierce storm, Rebecca woke to find Everett sitting up in bed, staring at nothing. "What is wrong?" she asked, immediately alert. He turned to her, his expression raw. Sometimes I just have to look at you to believe you are real, that this is real, that I got this lucky." Rebecca sat up and wrapped her arms around him. "I am real, we are real, and luck had nothing to do with it, Everett. We chose each other. We keep choosing each other every day. You matter to me so damned much," he said roughly. "Sometimes it scares me how much. I know. You matter to me too, enough that it scares me sometimes as well." She kissed his shoulder. "But we are brave enough to be scared together." He turned and pulled her into his lap, holding her close. "How did you get so wise?" "I had a good teacher," Rebecca replied, smiling against his neck. Spring arrived slowly, the snow retreating inch by inch to reveal the meadow greening beneath. Rebecca planted a garden with seeds Everett had brought back from town, her hands in the earth feeling like a promise of permanence. This was her home. These mountains, this cabin, this man. She was building a life here, putting down roots in soil that would nourish her rather than drain her. In April, she discovered she was pregnant. The realization came gradually, then all at once, and Rebecca felt a mix of joy and terror that left her breathless. She waited until she was absolutely certain before telling Everett, choosing a quiet evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "I have something to tell you," she said, her hands twisting in her lap. Everett immediately put down the piece of wood he had been carving, giving her his full attention. "What is it?" "I am pregnant." The words hung in the air between them. "We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Everett just stared at her. Then his face broke into pure joy, and he let out a whoop that probably scared every animal within a mile. He scooped her up despite her laughing protests and spun her around. "We are having a baby," he repeated, setting her down carefully as though she might break. "Rebecca, we are going to be parents. Are you happy?" she asked, even though she could see the answer written all over his face. Happy does not even begin to cover it. He placed his large hand over her still flat stomach. "You matter to me, and now this little one matters to me too. Our family matters to me." Rebecca covered his hand with hers. "I used to think I would never have this. A husband, a home, children. I thought I was not the kind of person who got to have a family." "You were always that kind of person," Everett said fiercely. "You just had not met the right people yet." As Rebecca's pregnancy progressed through the warm summer months, Everett became impossibly more protective and attentive. He took over all the heavy work, insisted she rest frequently, and worried constantly despite her assurances that she felt fine. When her belly began to swell, he would talk to it every night, telling their unborn child stories about the mountains and promising to teach them everything he knew. "What if I am not a good mother?" Rebecca asked one night as they lay in bed, Everett's hand resting on her rounded stomach. "You will be an excellent mother," Everett said with absolute certainty. "You are kind, patient, and full of love. That is what matters. But what if I repeat the mistakes that were made with me? What if I do not know how to show our child they matter?" Everett propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her seriously. "Rebecca, listen to me. You know exactly how it feels to not matter. That means you will never, ever let our children feel that way. You will love them fiercely and make sure they know their worth every single day. Just like I have done with you and just like you have done with me." His confidence in her was like armor against her doubts. "You really believe that?" "I know it," he corrected. "You matter to me, Rebecca, and you are going to teach our children that they matter too. We both will." In October, Rebecca went into labor during an early snowstorm. Everett had ridden to town weeks earlier to fetch the midwife, Mrs. Patterson, who had agreed to stay at the cabin as Rebecca's time approached. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day, but Everett never left her side except when Mrs. Patterson insisted. He held Rebecca's hand, wiped her face with cool cloths, and told her over and over that she was strong, that she could do this, that she mattered to him more than anything in the world. And when their son finally entered the world with a healthy cry, Everett openly wept. "A boy, Mrs. Patterson announced, placing the cleaned and swaddled infant in Rebecca's arms. "A healthy, strong boy." Rebecca looked down at the tiny face, overwhelmed with love so intense it hurt. The baby had Everett's nose and her mouth and eyes that would likely change color in the coming weeks. He was perfect. He was theirs. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We have been waiting for you." Everett sat on the edge of the bed, one arm around Rebecca and one finger grasped by their son's tiny hand. "He is perfect," he said in awe. "You did perfect, Rebecca." "We did perfect," she corrected, leaning against him tiredly. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names but never settled on one. Now, looking at their son, Everett said, "What about Samuel? It was my father's middle name." "Samuel Easton," Rebecca tested. "Yes, I like it. Hello, Samuel. You matter to us so much already." Mrs. Patterson stayed for a week, helping Rebecca recover and teaching her the basics of caring for a newborn. When she finally left, Rebecca felt both grateful for her help and relieved to have their family to themselves again. The first months of Samuel's life were exhausting but joyful. Rebecca had never been so tired or so happy. Everett was an involved father, helping with everything from diaper changes to midnight feedings. He would hold Samuel against his broad chest and walk around the cabin, talking to him about trees and animals and the mountains, his deep voice soothing the baby when nothing else would work. "You matter, Samuel," Everett would say seriously, looking into his son's eyes. "You matter to your mama and you matter to me. Do not ever forget that." Watching him with their son, Rebecca fell in love with Everett all over again. He was everything she had never known to hope for in a husband and father. As winter settled in again, they developed new routines to accommodate their growing family. Samuel slept in a cradle Everett had made, positioned near their bed so Rebecca could reach him easily for night feedings. The cabin felt full in the best way, alive with the sounds of a baby and the warmth of a family. One morning in December, as Rebecca nursed Samuel while Everett stoked the fire, he turned to her and said, "You matter to me, Rebecca. Both of you matter to me more than my own life." Rebecca smiled, the words washing over her like a benediction. "We know, Everett, we know because you show us every single day." "Do you believe it now, fully?" he asked. Rebecca thought about the question seriously. A year ago, she would have said no, unable to accept that she had inherent worth. 6 months ago, she might have said maybe, still working to internalize the concept. But now, looking at her husband and son, at the life they had built together, she could answer with complete honesty. "Yes," she said. "I believe it. I believe I matter. Not because of what I do or who I serve, but because I exist. Because I am loved and I love in return. Because I am part of this family that we built together." Everett's smile was brighter than the winter sun reflecting off snow. "That is all I have ever wanted, for you to know your worth." "You gave me that," Rebecca said softly. "You said it every morning until I finally believed it. You loved me before I knew how to love myself. You gave me a home, a family, a life. You gave me everything." "You gave me everything too," Everett replied, coming to sit beside her. He put his arm around her shoulders, careful not to disturb Samuel's nursing. "You brought light into my solitary life. You made this cabin a home. You gave me a son. You taught me that my heart could hold this much love without breaking." He kissed her temple. "You matter to me, Rebecca Easton. You always will. And you matter to me, Everett. You and Samuel both. My whole world matters to me." They sat together in the warm cabin while snow fell softly outside, a family complete and content. Rebecca thought about the lost, invisible woman she had been just over a year ago, and marveled at the distance she had traveled. Not in miles, but in understanding her own value. The years that followed were full and rich. Samuel grew into a sturdy toddler with his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair, curious and fearless in the way of mountain children. When he was 2, Rebecca became pregnant again, and in the autumn of 1870, she gave birth to a daughter they named Emma. Emma was small and delicate where Samuel was robust, but she had a will of iron from birth. Everett said she got it from her mother, the woman who had survived invisibility and isolation to build a life worth living. The cabin expanded with the family. Everett built an addition to give the children their own room, and Rebecca turned the original small bedroom into a dedicated space for spinning and weaving, a craft she had taken up to provide clothing and trade goods. Their life was not easy mountain living, never was, but it was good. It was real. It was theirs. Every morning, without fail, Everett would find Rebecca and say, "You matter to me." And she would reply, "You matter to me too." They said it to their children as well, making sure Samuel and Emma grew up knowing beyond any doubt that they were valued, loved, and important simply because they existed. When Samuel was 5 and Emma was 3, Rebecca stood on the porch one summer evening, watching Everett teach Samuel to fish in the creek while Emma picked wildflowers nearby. She placed a hand on her belly, feeling the flutter of the third child growing there, and felt overwhelming gratitude for the life she had been given. Everett looked up and caught her watching. Even across the distance, his smile was warm and full of love. He said something to Samuel, who waved enthusiastically at her, and then started walking back toward the cabin with both children. "What are you thinking about?" he asked when he reached her, Emma on his hip and Samuel holding his hand. "About how I used to think I did not matter," Rebecca said honestly. "About how wrong I was, and how grateful I am that you showed me the truth." Everett set Emma down so he could pull Rebecca into his arms, the children pressing close around their legs. "You have always mattered," he said against her hair. "I just helped you see it. You did more than that. You gave me a real life full of love and purpose and family." "We gave that to each other," Everett corrected. "That is what love is, Rebecca, building something together. Showing up every day and choosing each other." Rebecca looked at her husband, at her children, at the mountains rising beyond the meadow and felt complete peace. She mattered. Her family mattered. This life they had built together mattered. And every morning she woke up knowing it was true. The years continued to pass in a rhythm of seasons and growth. The third baby was another boy, named Thomas, who arrived in the spring of 1871 with his father's build and his mother's quiet determination. The cabin rang with children's laughter, arguments, and the constant noise of a growing family. Everett built more furniture, expanded the barn, and taught his children everything he knew about surviving and thriving in the mountains. Rebecca became known in Mojave as the woman who had tamed the hermit mountain man, though she always laughed at that description. She had not tamed anyone. They had simply found each other and built something worth keeping. When they made their twice-yearly trips to town for supplies, people would comment on how happy they looked, how healthy and strong their children were, how clearly in love they remained even after years of marriage. "What is your secret, Mrs. Patterson asked once, watching Everett chase a laughing Emma around the yard while Rebecca held baby Thomas. "No secret," Rebecca replied honestly. "We just make sure each other knows they matter, every single day without fail." On their 5th wedding anniversary in January of 1873, Everett surprised Rebecca by taking her into town without the children, leaving them in Mrs. Patterson's capable care for one night. They stayed at the boarding house, the same room where they had spent their wedding night, and Everett gave her a gift he had clearly planned carefully. It was a necklace made of silver, with a small pendant engraved with words, "You matter." "I had it made specially," Everett said as he fastened it around her neck. "I thought you should have something you could wear always to remind you even when I am not there to say it." Rebecca touched the pendant, tears streaming down her face. "Everett, it is perfect. You are perfect." "I am far from perfect," he said, pulling her close. "But I love you perfectly, that much I can promise." They made love that night with the tenderness and passion that had only deepened over the years, and in the morning Rebecca woke to Everett watching her sleep. "What?" she asked, smiling sleepily. "Just memorizing this moment," he replied. "You, happy and here with me, it is everything I never knew I wanted." "I love you," Rebecca said, reaching up to touch his bearded face. "I love our life, I love our family, I love who I became because of you." "You did not become someone new," Everett corrected gently. "You just became who you always were underneath all the hurt. That strong, kind, beautiful woman was always there. I just helped her feel safe enough to emerge." They returned to the cabin and their children, slipping back into the busy routine of family life. But Rebecca wore the necklace every day, and every time she touched it, she felt the truth of those words settle deeper into her bones. In the summer of 1874, when Samuel was 7, Emma was 5, and Thomas was 3, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder than the others, leaving her exhausted and sick for months. Everett took over even more of the household work, and the children learned to be helpful in new ways, with Samuel particularly stepping up to watch his younger siblings. The baby, another daughter they named Charlotte, was born in February of 1875 on one of the coldest nights of the year. The labor was difficult, and for a few terrifying hours the midwife was worried they might lose both mother and child. But Rebecca was strong, stronger than she had ever given herself credit for, and she fought her way through it. When Charlotte was finally placed in her arms, tiny but healthy, Rebecca looked at Everett through exhausted tears and said, "I matter too much to leave you. I was not going anywhere." Everett, who had been pale with fear throughout the ordeal, broke down completely. "I cannot lose you," he said roughly. "You matter too much. You are everything." "I am here," Rebecca soothed, even though she was the one who had just given birth. "We are both here. Our family is complete." And it was. Charlotte was their last child, rounding out their family at 2 boys and 2 girls. As she recovered from the difficult birth, Rebecca reflected on how far she had come from that lost woman in the Mojave trading post. She had built a life that mattered, raised children who knew their worth, and loved a man who had shown her what it meant to be truly valued. The children grew like wildflowers, hardy and strong and full of life. Samuel grew tall and broad like his father, already showing the same quiet competence and kindness. Emma was fierce and protective of her siblings, with a sharp mind and sharper tongue when needed. Thomas was gentle and thoughtful, happiest when he was helping his mother in the garden or caring for the animals. And Charlotte, the baby, was pure joy wrapped in determination, never letting her smaller size stop her from keeping up with her older siblings. Everett taught them all to hunt, fish, trap, and read the forest. Rebecca taught them to read books, do sums, cook, preserve, and the 1,000 small skills needed to run a household. But more than any practical skill, they taught their children that they mattered, that they had worth beyond what they could do or produce, that they were loved simply because they existed. One evening when Samuel was 10, he asked his parents a question that showed he was starting to understand the world beyond their mountain. "Papa, Mama, why do you always tell us we matter? Other families do not say that." Everett and Rebecca exchanged glances, and Rebecca knew they were both thinking about their own childhoods, about the absence of those words in their early lives. "Because it is true," Everett said seriously, "and because some people grow up never hearing it. Your mama was one of those people, and I came close. We want you to know it so deeply that you never doubt it, even when the world tries to tell you otherwise." "What if someone tells me I do not matter?" Emma asked, always ready to fight. "Then you remember what we told you," Rebecca replied. "You matter to yourself, to your family, and to anyone worth knowing. People who try to make you feel small do so because they feel small themselves. Do not let their pain become yours. You matter," Everett added, looking at each of his children in turn. "All of you matter. To us, to each other, and to the world. Never forget that." The children nodded solemnly, and Rebecca knew the lesson had taken root. They were raising children who knew their worth, who would never accept invisibility or insignificance. It was perhaps the greatest gift she and Everett could give them. In 1880, Samuel turned 13 and began talking about wanting to learn blacksmithing, fascinated by his grandfather's trade that Everett sometimes spoke of. Everett arranged for Samuel to apprentice with the blacksmith in Mojave during the summer months, riding down with him and staying in town to oversee his training. It meant months of separation, with Everett and Samuel gone from June through August. Rebecca missed them desperately, but she also felt proud. They were raising children capable of venturing into the world, confident and skilled. Emma helped run the household in her father's absence, taking on responsibilities with a maturity beyond her years. Thomas and Charlotte were inseparable, working together to tend the garden and animals. When Everett and Samuel returned in late August, Samuel was taller, more muscular, and bursting with stories about what he had learned. Everett looked tired but proud, and that night, after the children were asleep, he held Rebecca close. "I missed you every single day," he said, "telling you that you matter in person instead of just thinking it." "I missed hearing it," Rebecca admitted. "Though I believe it now even when you are not here to say it." "Good." He kissed her forehead. "That was always the point, for you to know it in your bones with or without me. I do know it. You gave me that, and now we are giving it to our children." "Best thing we will ever do," Everett agreed. The pattern continued over the years. Samuel spent summers apprenticing, then working as a blacksmith's assistant. Emma surprised them all by developing a talent for healing, learning everything she could from the town doctor during their visits to Mojave. Thomas remained at the cabin, taking over more of the hunting and trapping from Everett as he grew. And Charlotte became her mother's shadow, learning to cook, and manage a household with skill and creativity. In 1885, when Samuel was 18 and Emma was 16, they faced their first real crisis as a family. A late spring blizzard trapped them in the cabin for weeks, and their food stores ran dangerously low. Everett and Samuel made the risky decision to venture out hunting despite the weather, and Rebecca spent 3 days sick with worry before they returned with a deer that would feed them through the rest of the storm. "Do not ever do that to me again," she said fiercely when Everett walked through the door, snow-covered and half-frozen. "Had to keep our family fed," he replied, his lips blue with cold. "We matter too much to just give up." It was the first time he had turned the phrase around, applying it to himself and Samuel, and Rebecca felt her heart clench with love and fear in equal measure. She helped him out of his frozen clothes, warmed him by the fire, and held him close that night, grateful beyond words that he had returned safely. That spring brought another change. Samuel announced that he had been offered a position as a full blacksmith in a town in Nevada, and he wanted to take it. It was the first time one of their children would truly leave home, and Rebecca felt the loss keenly even as she supported his decision. "You matter to us," she told him the night before he left. "No matter where you go or what you do, you will always matter to your father and me. Come home when you can, write when you cannot, and know that you are loved." Samuel, nearly as tall as his father now and built like a young ox, hugged her tight. "You taught me I could do anything because I matter. I am only brave enough to leave because of what you and Papa gave me." Everett clasped his son's shoulder, his eyes bright with emotion. "You matter, son. Make a good life for yourself. We are proud of you." Samuel left in May, and the cabin felt emptier without his presence. But letters arrived regularly, full of news about his work and his life, and Rebecca treasured each one. Emma began making noises about wanting to study medicine more formally, and Rebecca knew it was only a matter of time before she left too. In 1887, Emma did indeed leave, traveling to San Francisco to attend a school for nurses. It was almost unheard of for a mountain girl with no formal education to be accepted. But Emma's natural talent and fierce determination had impressed the doctor in Mojave, who wrote her a glowing recommendation. With 2 of their 4 children gone, the cabin felt strange and quiet. Thomas was 15 and Charlotte was 12, both still at home but growing rapidly toward adulthood. Rebecca found herself facing the reality that the intense child-raising years were ending and a new phase of life was beginning. "Are you all right?" Everett asked one evening, finding her sitting on the porch staring at the mountains. "I am thinking about time," Rebecca said. "About how fast it passes, about how we are growing old." Everett sat beside her, taking her hand. "We are not old yet, just experienced. I have gray in my hair." "Makes you more beautiful." He tugged a silver strand gently. "You matter to me just as much at 42 as you did at 22. More even, because now I know every inch of your heart and I love what I found there." Rebecca leaned against him. "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life. That I got this lucky. Not luck. Choice. We chose each other, we chose this life, and we keep choosing it every day." He kissed the top of her head. "You matter to me, Rebecca Easton. That has not changed in 20 years and it never will." "You matter to me too," she replied, the words as natural as breathing after all these years. In 1890, Thomas left to work as a guide for hunting parties, his knowledge of the mountains and way with animals making him valuable to wealthy men who wanted to experience the wilderness safely. He promised to return often, and he kept that promise, showing up every few months with stories and money to contribute to the household. That left just Charlotte at home, now 15, and beginning to attract attention from young men in town. Rebecca was not quite ready to think about her baby leaving too, but Everett reminded her gently that they had raised their children to have wings. "They leave because they know they matter enough to pursue their dreams," he said. "That is what we wanted. I know. I just miss them." "I miss them too, but they will come back. This place matters to them, and so do we. They will always come home." And they did. Samuel returned in the summer of 1891 with a wife, a sweet girl named Grace who fit into the family immediately. Emma came home that fall, certified as a nurse and full of plans to open a clinic in Mojave. Thomas brought his hunting parties to the cabin occasionally, showing off his childhood home with obvious pride. And Charlotte, after a brief courtship, married a rancher's son from nearby and settled close enough to visit weekly. In 1892, Samuel and Grace gave Everett and Rebecca their first grandchild, a boy named Everett James. When Samuel placed the baby in his father's arms, Everett's eyes filled with tears. "You matter, little one," he said softly. "You matter so much already." Rebecca watched her husband with their grandson and felt her heart might burst. This was legacy. Not just children, but grandchildren who would grow up knowing their worth because their parents knew it, because their grandparents had modeled it. More grandchildren followed over the years. Emma surprised everyone by marrying a doctor she met in San Francisco and having 3 daughters in quick succession. Thomas married a Paiute woman he met while guiding, and they had 2 sons who were equally comfortable in the wilderness and in town. Charlotte had 4 children, a mix of boys and girls who filled her ranch house with noise and laughter. The cabin in the mountains became a gathering place, with children and grandchildren visiting regularly. Everett built more furniture to accommodate everyone, and Rebecca cooked enormous meals that brought multiple generations together around the table. They told stories of the early days, of how they met, of building their life together, of the first years when it was just the 2 of them against the world. "Tell us about when Grandma arrived in Mojave," the grandchildren would beg, and Rebecca would tell the story of being lost and alone, and how Everett had offered her a place when she had nowhere else to go. "Why did you help her, Grandpa?" one of Emma's daughters asked. Everett looked at Rebecca, his eyes still holding the same warmth they had held 30 years earlier. "Because she mattered. I knew it the moment I saw her, even if she did not know it herself." "How did you know?" another grandchild pressed. "Some things you just know in your heart," Everett replied. "Your grandma needed someone to see her, really see her, and tell her she had worth. So I did. Every day until she believed it." "Do we matter, Grandpa?" asked little Everett James, now 5 years old. "More than you can possibly imagine," Everett said seriously. "You matter to your parents, your grandparents, your cousins, and most importantly, you matter to yourself. Never let anyone tell you different." The children nodded, absorbing the lesson that had been passed down through generations now. They were growing up knowing their worth, confident and loved, and Rebecca felt proud beyond measure of the family she and Everett had built. In 1900, Rebecca and Everett celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary. Their children organized a huge gathering at the cabin, with all the grandchildren present and friends from town making the journey up the mountain. It was a testament to the life they had built, the connections they had maintained, the love they had cultivated. That night, after everyone had gone to sleep in various rooms and corners of the expanded cabin, Everett and Rebecca slipped outside to sit on the porch under the stars. 25 years, Rebecca marveled. "It feels like both forever and no time at all." "Best 25 years of my life," Everett said. His hair was more gray than brown now, his beard nearly white, but he was still strong and solid, still her mountain man. "Mine too. You gave me everything, Everett. A home, a family, a life worth living. But most of all, you gave me myself. You taught me that I mattered." "You taught me the same," Everett replied. "I was half alive up here before you came, just surviving, not really living. You showed me what love was, what family could be. You matter to me, Rebecca. You have mattered every single day for 25 years, and you will matter every day for however many years we have left." "You matter to me too," Rebecca said, her voice thick with emotion. "You always will." They sat together in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching the stars wheel overhead. Rebecca thought about the journey that had brought her here, from invisible and insignificant to loved and valued. It had not been easy or quick, but it had been worth it. The years continued to pass, marked by seasons and celebrations, losses and joys. In 1903, they lost their first grandchild to illness, one of Emma's daughters, and the grief shook the entire family. But they weathered it together, supporting each other through the pain, and Rebecca marveled at how different grief felt when you had people who loved you to help carry it. In 1905, Everett slowed down noticeably, his joints stiff from decades of hard mountain living. He was 63 years old, and though still capable, He could no longer work from dawn to dusk the way he once had. Thomas took over most of the heavy labor, visiting frequently to help maintain the cabin and property. Rebecca, at 59, felt the years in her own bones and joints, but she remained active and engaged. She had 15 grandchildren now, ranging in age from infant to young adult, and she delighted in each one. They all knew the story of their grandmother arriving in Mojave with nothing, and their grandfather telling her every morning that she mattered until she believed it. It had become family legend, a story of love and perseverance that defined who they were. In 1907, Samuel's oldest son, Everett James, now 20, announced he was getting married. The wedding brought the whole family together again, and as Rebecca watched her grandson marry his sweetheart, she felt the circle completing. This was legacy. This was what mattered. Not wealth or fame or accomplishment, but love passed down through generations, children who knew their worth raising children who knew theirs. That night, Everett held Rebecca close in their bed and said, "We did good, did we not?" "We did," Rebecca agreed. "We built something that will outlast us. A family that knows how to love, how to value each other, how to make sure everyone knows they matter." "That was always the most important thing," Everett murmured. "Making sure you knew, making sure our children knew, making sure it continued." "It will," Rebecca assured him. "Look at our grandchildren. They are confident, kind, strong. They know their worth. We gave them that." "We gave each other that," Everett corrected. "I love you, Rebecca. You matter to me more than my own life. I love you too, and I know I matter. You spent 30 years making sure I knew it." They fell asleep in each other's arms, two people who had found each other against impossible odds and built a life that mattered. In the spring of 1910, Everett fell ill. It started as a cough that would not go away, then developed into a fever that left him weak and struggling to breathe. Emma came immediately, her medical training brought to bear on her own father, but even she could not fight the pneumonia that had settled in his lungs. For 2 weeks, Rebecca barely left his bedside. She held his hand, cooled his fever, and talked to him about their life together. Their children took turns sitting with them, and the grandchildren visited to say goodbye, though Everett rallied enough to tell each one that they mattered, that they should never forget it. On a cool spring morning, with Rebecca holding one hand and Samuel holding the other, Everett took his last breath. His final words were barely a whisper. "You matter, Rebecca, always." "You matter to me too," Rebecca whispered back, tears streaming down her face. "You always will." The grief was enormous, a physical weight that made it hard to breathe. But Rebecca was not alone in it. Her children surrounded her, her grandchildren, her friends. They held her up when she could not stand on her own, and slowly, gradually, she learned to live with the loss. She stayed in the cabin, unable to imagine leaving the home she and Everett had built together. Thomas and Charlotte visited frequently, and there was always a grandchild or two staying with her. On difficult mornings, when she woke reaching for Everett and found empty space instead, she would touch the necklace he had given her all those years ago and remember. You matter. She did matter. Everett had spent 30 years making sure she knew it, and even though he was gone, that truth remained. She mattered to her children, her grandchildren, her friends. She mattered to herself. And she mattered to Everett's memory, keeping his legacy alive by continuing to tell their story, by making sure every person in her family knew their worth. Rebecca lived another 8 years, surrounded by love and family. She saw more grandchildren marry, welcomed great-grandchildren into the world, and became the matriarch of a sprawling family that all traced their sense of worth back to the mountain man, who had told an invisible woman that she mattered. In the summer of 1918, at the age of 72, Rebecca died peacefully in her sleep in the cabin she had shared with Everett for 43 years. Her children found her in the morning, still wearing the necklace he had given her, a peaceful smile on her face. They buried her next to Everett on the hill overlooking the meadow, and at her funeral, every member of the family spoke about what she had taught them, about worth and value and mattering, about building a life based on love rather than fear, about choosing each other every day and never letting anyone forget they had significance. Samuel's son, Everett James, now 33 and with children of his own, spoke last. "My grandparents taught our family the most important lesson anyone can learn," he said, standing between their graves. "That we matter. Not because of what we do or who we know, but simply because we exist, that we have worth that cannot be taken away." They lived that truth every day, and they made sure we knew it too. That is their legacy. Not this land or this cabin, but the knowledge that we matter, that we all matter. The family murmured agreement, and one by one, they placed wildflowers on both graves. The mountain man and the woman who had never been told. She mattered until he said it every morning, until she finally believed him. Together even in death, their love story becoming legend, their legacy living on in every child and grandchild who knew without question that they had worth. The cabin remained in the family for generations, carefully maintained and passed down, a monument to the love that had transformed two broken people into a family that knew its value. And on quiet mornings, when the mist rose from the meadow and the mountains stood silent and eternal, it was almost possible to hear a deep voice saying, "You matter," and a softer one replying, "You matter to me too." The story of Rebecca and Everett became the foundation their family built upon, a reminder that love was not just romance or passion, but the daily choice to see and value another person, to tell them they mattered, to show up every single day and choose each other again. And in a world that often made people feel invisible and insignificant, that was perhaps the greatest love story of all.